Have you ever heard that knitting was for old ladies? Well, I'm here to tell you knitting's for everybody. Anything in the fiber arts world is for anybody. And in this episode, we're going to discuss that. So stay tuned. I don't know about some of you guys, but I was always told like knitting and crocheting was for old people. Now, as much as I was being taught and like was interested in yarn and knitting in the fiber arts world, even from a young age, those of you who have listened to my previous episodes, you might have heard me talk about that. As much as I was interested in it, I was told it wasn't the cool thing to do. Like people knitting granny squares and all these other things that people knit and crochet nowadays, and the fun color yarn that we see. I knew nothing about that, and that wasn't the environment or the people I were around when I was growing up. So a lot of times I was told that I should get a young person hobby instead of an old lady hobby. When they thought of knitting, they would think of the stereotypical image of a little old lady with her sweater and sitting on a park bench with her bag of yarn knitting. That's what people thought. Like if you knitted or crocheted, like people would tell you were boring, or you needed to get out more, or you needed to find a young person hobby, at least where I came from. So yeah, unfortunately I was always shamed for knitting until I got in my early 20s. I should say, excuse me, crocheting, because at the time I didn't know how to knit, but I was always shamed for my enjoyment of yarn. So I'm here today to say what I wish somebody told me many, many years ago. Do you? Do you? Knitting can be fun, knitting can be cool. It's what you make it. It doesn't have to be the itchy wool sweater that everybody talks about. It doesn't have to be the dull colored yarn that so and so uses. It doesn't have to be this made up stereotype that people portray knitting and to be, or like I shouldn't even say people, because a lot of times it's people who don't knit or crochet. This is sometimes what I've heard people that don't or do these things, or that aren't interested in the fiber world. That was their depiction to me, unfortunately. Excuse me. But I'm here today to say you can knit at any age. Like these old ladies that they talk about, a lot of them didn't just start knitting. Some did. But a lot of them have been knitting since they were like 7, 8 years old. They learned from their grandmothers, their moms, and so forth. Like, that's how some of them got to be as good and as experienced as they are today, to be able to make some of the things they make just with years and years of practice and time put into their craft. Mistakes, learning how to fix their mistakes, learning how to do different cast-ons, learning about different yarns and fibers. That's years and years worth of knowledge, and some of them started when they were really young. And it's like, in order to be able to even conceivably be that old lady that stereotypical old lady people think of, sitting on a park bench or sitting anywhere and knitting, or even in their grandmother's house, in order to be that old lady, you had to start somewhere. You had to be young at one point, knitting or crocheting or doing whatever fiber arts. Like, so knitting isn't just for old ladies. Crocheting isn't just for old ladies. Weaving, spinning, whatever fiber arts you do isn't just for old ladies. It's for everyone. And like, one of the best ways to get better at it is to start now. Start learning it. So that's my take on it. Um, I started, and again, you guys, if you guys have listened to the previous episodes, I started when I was about 7, 8 years old, learning how to crochet from my mom. Still not the best crocheter, but it branched off into me learning how to knit. I became a better knitter through the years from practice, from starting not when I became an old lady or not many years later, but just starting wherever I was in life. And that's many knitters. So I'm here to tell you, knitting has no age. Yarn has no age. If that's what you like, do it. Be around people and other people. Be around people who motivate you to do what you enjoy, and that's for any area of your life. But also, even in the fiber arts world, be around people who encourage you and are doing some of the same things you are and help you to want to keep going and not get discouraged or not feel like what you're doing is uncool or boring or not a young person hobby. So if you need encouragement, I'll be your first source of encouragement. Get out. If you've never done it before, get out there and try it. Like, if you decide you don't like it, you don't have to do it ever again. Like, that's the beauty of it. You're not stuck with it. You're not stuck with any hobby. You won't know if you like it until you try. And if you're already in it, I say keep going. If you enjoy it, do what makes you happy. Don't worry about what everybody else thinks. So that's my take on that. In the next segment, we talk about diversity and yarn all over the world. So keep listening. In this episode, we're going to talk about diversity in the yarn world. Now, in the previous segment, I talked about the little lady that people depict who love yarn. But that's only one type of yarn lover. Yeah, very well can be that old lady. But however, if you go into, let's say, a yarn shop or even Michael's, you'll find people from all backgrounds, all colors, all ages, all different personalities who are interested in the yarn and fiber arts world. When I say diversity in yarn world, there's all kinds of diversity. I mean, there's different ways to knit, crochet, there's different fibers, but for today, I'm going to keep it to people, since we're talking about the fact that yarn isn't just for old ladies, because really yarn has no age limit. If you look at going back to the yarn shops and so forth, or even just seeing the aisles of Michael's or Joann's, like, you'll see the kid that's just getting their first pair of knitting needles and looking for their first ball of yarn to learn how to knit. You'll see the old ladies in the store sitting around the table who have been knitting for years, and you'll also see the old lady who is picking up their first pair of knitting needles or crochet hook and learning how to knit for the first time or revisiting it to get a refresher because they haven't done it in many years. You'll see the expectant mom looking for yarn to make her baby something. You'll see the 20 somethings that are just enjoying themselves and like just making anything and everything. You'll see people who like more subdued tones of yarn, like the more muted colors. You'll see people who love the bright fluorescent colors. That's me, by the way. You'll see people who like a certain type of fiber. You'll see people who like all kinds of fiber. It's endless. There's no one type of person or one type of yarn lover. So, yeah, I would like to get that notion out of people's mind. I know I can't, but I do try to what's the word I'm looking for? Look beyond the old lady who loves yarn, and or even the fact that like yarn is a woman's hobby, because there are plenty of men I know who knit too, old and young. So yarn is for everybody, and I say don't let anybody tell you any different. Like, if that's what you like, do it. And like right now, like the yarn and fiber world is exploding, and I think it's amazing. From large scale things to even just more people picking it up and learning how to do it, I think it's awesome. You've got yarn bombing, you've got people making swimsuits out of yarn, you've got people making handbags out of yarn. Like, even if you go on like Instagram or TikTok, like the amount of things and people, the amount of things being made out of yarn and people that are making things out of yarn is amazing. It's endless. You can easily scroll for a really, really long time and just end up doom scrolling, looking at all the cool things that people are making. So don't let anybody tell you that yarn isn't cool or that yarn is for old ladies and so forth, because it's not. Moving on to the next segue. Sorry. I will see you there. Not sure if that's going to be, but I will see you there. Going back to the old lady for a minute. Also, the old lady isn't just the old lady on the bench who just magically just became old one day and just started knitting. Chances are, not everybody. Some people are picking up their first set of knitting needles or a crochet hook at a later point in life. And some are revisiting that where they were taught from a younger age. To deep dive on or to go a little further and elaborate with the young age, a lot of people who have been doing it for years were taught at a younger age, whether it be in their 20s or whether they were taught as a kid. And a lot of times it was passed down from a family member or an aunt or a grandmother, or somebody they knew, or maybe they even took a class. Maybe they went to summer camp and learned it. Maybe they went to a yarn store at a young age and was taught. There are all type of ways, but point is, they started potentially at a younger age than they are now. They're not just the old lady who, again, just magically appeared because they got old with a pair of knitting needles. Also, there are some people who, again, they are picking up their first pair of knitting needles later on in life. Therefore, with all this being said, knitting, crocheting, it does not have a certain age. There are people who are younger than those so-called old ladies who have been doing it a lot longer, who have more knowledge, who have more experience because they've been doing it longer, compared to the old lady who's just picking up her first pair of knitting needles at a later stage in life. Also, in order for there to be a new generation of knitters and yarn lovers, there has to be somebody to teach the new generation. Whether it be somebody my age or whether it be, again, one of those little old ladies who pass it down to someone younger, whether it be their grandkids, a neighbor, their great niece or nephew or whatever. In order for it to keep being passed down, somebody has to teach it. It has to start somewhere. It doesn't just, you don't just boom, you're like an old lady, whatever that means to some people. whatever age is considered old. It's not just boom, one day you wake up and you just have this knowledge of how to knit or crochet. No, it has to be acquired through the years. It has to be something you practice. It has to be something you constantly gain knowledge on. It's time spent, it's work, it's mistakes made and learning from your mistakes. That's how you become better at your craft. That's how you become able to make some of these cool pieces that you see people making. That's how you become able to knit or crochet or whatever later on in life and can say, oh, I've been doing it for years. You had to start somewhere. So in order, before you become an old knitter, you have to be potentially a young knitter. So it's not necessarily, I mean, you could be picking up your first set of knitting needles for the first time at 60. I mean, but again, it has to start somewhere. It doesn't just, it's not just instantaneous. So with everything being said, do what you love. Don't worry about what anybody else has to think of you. Don't worry about who says it's an old lady hobby. Don't worry about how old you are. Don't worry about anything. If you like what you're doing and it's not bothering anybody or infringing on anybody else, enjoy what you're doing. People are going to have their opinions. People are going to have their thoughts. Brush it off. Let it roll off your back like water on a duck's back. Keep doing what makes you happy. Keep growing and thriving. Keep practicing your craft and getting better at it. Yeah. If you're interested in what I'm doing when I'm not making a podcast, or you're interested in some of my projects, that can be found on my Instagram and TikTok, both handles for that, or Shar's Pearls. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Take care, enjoy what you're doing, and be safe. Have a good one.